Captain Kirk's Star Trek comeback was inspired by the last heroes you'd expect. For decades, Captain James T. Kirk has stood as one of science fiction's most iconic heroes, brash, brilliant, reckless, and relentlessly human. From William Shatner's trailblazing portrayal in Star Trek, the original series, to Chris Pine's swaggering reboot in J.J. Abrams' Kelvin timeline, Kirk has always represented the quintessential Starfleet captain: instinct over protocol, charisma over calculation. Yet, when news surfaced that Star Trek was preparing for another major Kirk comeback, few expected that the inspiration behind his revival would come not from within Star Trek's vast legacy of captains, but from a completely different breed of heroes altogether, ones far removed from Starfleet's code of honor and diplomacy. In reimagining Kirk for a new generation, the creative minds behind his latest Star Trek appearance didn't turn to Spock's stoic logic or Picard's refined leadership. Instead, they found influence in some of modern pop culture's least likely figures: anti-heroes, rebels, and even broken men struggling for redemption. It's an unlikely blend of myth, pop psychology, and modern storytelling that has turned Kirk's long-awaited comeback into one of the most daring reinterpretations in Star Trek history. Kirk's original legacy, the ideal Starfleet maverick. To understand how radical this new Kirk is, it helps to revisit who he was at the beginning. Shatner's Captain Kirk embodied 1960s optimism, a man who believed humanity could conquer any challenge with courage and reason. He was Starfleet's cowboy diplomat, charging into the unknown with charm and conviction. He wasn't flawless, but his flaws were forgivable, even endearing. Kirk's impulsive decisions usually paid off. His hunches almost always turned out right. The universe seemed to bend toward his charisma. For decades, that version of Kirk defined the standard for what a captain should be. Even when Chris Pine took over the role in 2009 Star Trek, his interpretation was an energetic echo of that same archetype, a little rougher around the edges, perhaps, but still fundamentally optimistic and idealistic. The reboot Kirk was a rebel, yes, but one who ultimately believed in Starfleet's mission to explore and protect. But as modern television and cinema evolved, so did its heroes. And when Star Trek decided it was time for Kirk to return again, this time in strange new worlds and beyond, the writers faced a creative dilemma. How do you make a 1960s idealist relevant in a world where audiences have fallen in love with flawed, morally complex protagonists? The new age of anti-heroes and Kirk's unexpected company. In recent years, pop culture has gravitated toward heroes who are anything but perfect. Tony Stark, with his ego and guilt; Geralt of Rivia, stoic and world-weary; Din Djarin, reluctant and haunted; even John Wick, a man defined by grief and vengeance. These characters share a depth that modern audiences crave, a willingness to show pain, vulnerability, and consequence. When Strange New Worlds reintroduced Paul Wesley's James T. Kirk, the creative team made a daring decision: to make Kirk feel less like a flawless paragon and more like a man still figuring out who he wants to be. The new Kirk is ambitious but unsure, confident yet reflective, a man molded as much by doubt as by courage. He's no longer the mythic cowboy. He's a human being who bleeds, regrets, and reconsiders. The producers have even hinted in interviews that Kirk's new arc was inspired by a fascinating blend of modern characters, from Star Wars' Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi to HBO's Succession anti-heroes. Like Luke, this Kirk is struggling under the shadow of his own myth, aware that living up to legend may be impossible. And like the morally gray Roy siblings, he's navigating a galaxy where leadership means compromise, not glory. It's an unexpected mix, but it works. Because while Kirk once embodied the clean-cut optimism of the 1960s, today's audiences want their captains to feel real. That means showing cracks in the armor, emotional baggage, and a sense of personal evolution. A touch of Tony Stark and a hint of Maverick. Perhaps the most surprising influence on Kirk's comeback is Iron Man himself. The MCU's Tony Stark is a genius plagued by guilt and ego, a man whose impulsiveness constantly threatens the stability he's sworn to protect. Sound familiar? The creative parallels are striking. Both men are brilliant risk-takers who rely on instinct. Both struggle with authority and occasionally let arrogance lead them astray. and both ultimately discover that their strength lies in empathy, not ego. In recent interviews, Strange New Worlds showrunner Henry Alonso Myers even suggested that Kirk's new arc would examine leadership under pressure in an age of constant uncertainty. That framing feels straight out of Tony Stark's playbook, a hero learning that saving the universe isn't about bravado, but about responsibility. Then there's the influence of another cinematic maverick, Tom Cruise Pete Maverick Mitchell from Top Gun, Maverick. The 2022 sequel redefined what it means for an aging icon to return, grounding his once cocky attitude in regret, mentorship, and hard-earned wisdom. Kirk's new portrayal channels that same energy, a man haunted by the ghosts of what he might become. He's still a rebel, but one who's finally beginning to understand the cost of defiance. Kirk's humanity reborn in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. Paul Wesley's Kirk doesn't arrive as the larger-than-life captain audiences remember. Instead, we see him in fragments, alternate timelines, what-if scenarios, and glimpses of the man he's destined to be. It's a clever storytelling choice that mirrors how Star Trek has often used its characters to explore the human condition. By showing Kirk before his legend solidifies, the writers open a space for self-discovery, something that feels profoundly modern. The old Kirk was his legend. The new Kirk is becoming it. And that distinction changes everything. It allows the show to explore how leadership is learned, not inherited. It also invites us to empathize with the young man behind the myth. In this way, the new Kirk takes a page not just from Tony Stark or Maverick, but from heroes like The Last of Us's Joel, flawed, haunted, fiercely human. These are men who act out of love as much as duty, who make terrible mistakes but grow because of them. The Kirk of the 2020s doesn't have all the answers. He's still learning how to balance compassion with command, and that's precisely what makes him relatable. Rebel blood. Why Star Trek needed this Kirk? For a franchise often celebrated for its utopian ideals, Star Trek has always thrived on tension between order and chaos, between Federation policy and human instinct. Kirk represents that conflict better than anyone, but the modern era demanded that it evolve beyond swagger. By drawing inspiration from anti-heroes, modern Star Trek acknowledges that the galaxy is no longer as simple as it once seemed. The Federation isn't perfect. Exploration has consequences. Even the best intentions can lead to moral compromise. This isn't the clean-cut optimism of the 23rd century. It's the messy reality of humanity trying, failing, and trying again. And in that space, Kirk shines brighter than ever. This new vision doesn't diminish his legacy, it deepens it. It suggests that Kirk's greatness wasn't predestined, it was forged in doubt and failure. His comeback feels earned precisely because he's no longer a flawless archetype. He's us, a person learning to lead in a world that no longer promises easy answers. Kirk is the bridge between generations. Interestingly, this transformation also makes Kirk the perfect